Today we're going to explore what ratios are. A ratio is a comparison of two quantities with the same unit. So you can use ratios to compare the apples with the bananas. So you would say the ratio of apples to bananas would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And how many bananas? 4. So the ratio would be apples to bananas would be 6 to 4. If I were going to compare the bananas to the apples, the ratio would be 4 to 6. So it depends on which thing you're comparing first. There's another way to compare, and that is comparing parts to the whole. So if you were going to compare apples to fruit, it would be 6 to 10 because there are 10 different fruit there. So this is part to part, but this one is part to whole. So if I were going to compare bananas to fruit, it would be 4 to 10. Notice it's just two little dots, and I am trying to write with my mouse, so if it's not super neat, that's why. Another way we can write a ratio is like a fraction. When you're comparing part of a set to a whole, it's like a fraction. So you can write it 6 out of 10 are apples. Or you could say 4 out of 10 are bananas. And that's basically all you need to know. It's not difficult. Let's do a few more. Okay, here we have some wrapped hard candies and some chocolate. So if we were going to do part to part, we would say there are 4 wrapped candies and how many chocolates? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the part to part would be 4 candies to 8 chocolates, or we could do from chocolates to candies. So we would say 8 chocolates to 4 candies. If we wanted to do a part to whole comparison, we would say 4 candies to how many sweets altogether? 12 sweets. And when you're doing part to whole, you can also write it like a fraction. There are 4 candies out of 12 sweets. If you wanted to do part to whole with the chocolates, you would say there are 8 chocolates to 12 sweets altogether, and you could write it as a fraction. Now, when you are writing it as a fraction, that only works when you're doing part to whole, part to whole. When you're comparing part to part, you don't write it as a fraction. And now, if you're going to write it as a fraction, a decimal, a percent, and a ratio, well, let's look at that. Let's say, let's go back to the sample that we just looked at. There are 4 hard candies and 8 chocolates, but if we look at it as sweets, there are 4 out of 12 are going to be, let's move on. So 4 out of 12 are hard candies. Now, converting that to a decimal is difficult because it's a 12 on the bottom. So what you need to do is put it in simplest form. What are these numbers both divisible by? Well, they're both divisible by 4. 4 goes into 4 one time, and 4 goes into 12 3 times. Now, 1/3 is an unusual one. We can't convert it easily to a decimal, but we do know that if you take 1 and divide it by 3, you're going to get a repeating decimal. It goes on and on and on and on and on. So what we usually say is just, it's about 0. we would just say it's about 0.33. Percent, 33%. In a ratio, 1 to 3. Now you could also put the ratio of 4 to 12. So if the question's asking you to show it as a fraction, a decimal, a percent, and a ratio, this is what you would do. I'm just going to erase this and try and pick a simpler fraction because 1/3 doesn't work awesome. But where's my pen? Sorry, guys. This is all new to me trying to do this way. Okay, let's do a fraction like 1/4. We should know that the decimal, does anybody know what the percentage 1/4 would be? These are one of the ones I said yesterday that you should just have memorized. It's 25%. So then what would the decimal be? Man, I wish I could write better with this mouse. The decimal would be 0.25. And what would the ratio be? 1 to 4. So I think you'll find this lesson pretty simple. It's basically just like doing fractions, only we're writing it down sideways with 2 little dots in between. It's nothing more complicated than that.